Hey everybody, this is Randy Brown for Cameo Man 2021 and the Mayor of Magic. I'd like to thank everybody who's already here, that person being Exhumed Visions. What up, Exhumed? Good to have you here, man. So now we're here, and I guess I'll just start the stream. First off, I want to start off with a little bit about me, because you might be wondering, well, Randy, who are you, and who are you to be giving writing advice? Well, I am a working screenwriter. As of today, I've sold 54 scripts on Fiverr.com, and thanks, Exhibitions. I appreciate that. And I'm also the author of 6 books. The 6 books are the Little Memory Book, 7 Little Tricks That Make a Big Difference. Then we have Quantify and Achieve Your Goals, which is a book on goal setting. Then we have the book on comedy, which is, stand-up comedy tips and techniques to do jokes and stuff. Then we have Every Day is Magic, which is my novel about a magician who travels across country to do magic for his favorite actress. And then we have 13 fiction writing mistakes and how to fix them too. And then the last book I have out is on Amazon right now is the tiny book of awesome magic. So those are my credentials. I got that out of the way. I sell screenplays for a modest price, around $375. And I've had many takers and many satisfied customers and 5-star reviews. So now that we got that all out of the way, I am going to go over 7 ways to get unblocked. And for each of those 7 tips, I'm going to be adding 7 subsections to them. So we got a lot to go over. So the first way to get unblocked and to kick writer's block ass is to check your concept. All right. Now there's several things you need to know and ask yourself when you're creating a good concept, because some concepts are only good for a one-off. Home Alone is a really good example, because the premise of Home Alone is a good premise, but it is an inherently flawed premise because you don't have a lot of options for sequels. Because check this out. Okay, in Home Alone Part 1, Kevin McAllister is like 8 years old, and an 8-year-old Home Alone with robbers trying to break in, that's a great concept. Yeah. For that one movie, that's a great concept. And then a few years later, they did Kevin McAllister when he was about 12 years old. And he's like, oh, he's 12 years old and he's alone in New York. But the problem with this concept is you really can't go farther than 1 or 2 without changing the character. And everybody loves Kevin McAllister. Everybody loves Macaulay Culkin. Hey, what's up, Yakvo? And the problem with it is, by the time they had to do the 3rd sequel, Kevin McAllister was like 15, and then suddenly the concept lost its shine. Like a 15-year-old Home Alone, it's not a really big deal. See, so you gotta check your concept, and you gotta make sure that you have a long-lasting concept that will go over many movies. Like when producers get a screenplay, they're thinking, okay, if this is good, we're going to do sequels. We're going to do tons and tons of sequels. So the first question you want to ask when you check your concept is, does your hero have a goal? Okay, Norm talked about the same thing. To continue the sequels, Kevin would have to become mentally regraded. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, so, and that's the thing. Does your hero have a goal? Because your hero's goal is how you determine the ending, and we're going to get to that a little bit later, but it's very important that your character have a specific goal. Like, for example, if your character's goal is to be the best person he can possibly be, yeah, that's a good goal to start, but how does he do that? Like, specifically, like, how does he become a better person? Does he, like, make $5 million? Does he lose, like, 100 pounds of fat? Does he get married? Like, what is the specific goal? You want to get really specific with your goal, because if your goal is specific and measurable, then you know the ending of your movie. But again, we're going to get to the endings of movies a little bit later. So Two, is there a villain? Number one, if you're blocked, this would be the number one thing that I would check. Is there a villain? Is there somebody to provide conflict? Because as we'll find out later, conflict is the heartbeat of the story. And if you don't have a villain, a clear-cut villain, it's going to be very difficult for you to sustain a long-term conflict. And that is the thing that I think has made the Batman movies so great. I mean, all the Batman movies, with probably the exception of Batman and Robin, have been fantastic movies. They've all been great. And you know why they've all been great? Because Batman has always had clear-cut villains. We got the Joker, we got Catwoman, we got the Penguin, we got the Riddler, we got Two-Face, we got Bane. All of these characters were really strong villains. And, you can really judge the quality of a hero by its villain. Almost every good hero has a good villain. Like Clarice Starling has Hannibal Lecter, Neo has Agent Smith, God has Satan. So they all have good villains, and Batman has the most villains of all times, and Batman is hands down one of the most popular character in comics. If you look at the top 100 comics, they rank them monthly. Batman comics are nearly the bulk of the entire list because Batman has so many good villains, and those good villains provide good conflict. And number three, are there good supporting characters? Now, you really want to have... I have four characters in every script and screenplay that I do. I have the hero, I have the villain, and then I have the love interest, and then I have the best friend or the sidekick. Now, the best friend or the sidekick is really important because your hero needs a sounding board. That's why Batman has Robin, and before Batman had Robin, he had Alfred, and Commissioner Gordon. And that is why Superman has Jimmy Olsen. Somebody to bounce their ideas off. That's why Sherlock Holmes has Watson. It is a perfect example, And Sherlock Holmes would bounce ideas off of Watson. And Sherlock's ideas were always really thoughtful and complex. And, sometimes Watson would point out, it's not thoughtful or complex. Obviously, this guy did it because... And then he pointed out the common sense reason why that person did it. So your hero needs a sounding board. And, your hero with his sidekick or best friend is going to provide a lot of material, not only to humanize the character, but to give him somebody to shoot the shit with, and stuff like that. Number four, is there a love interest? We're going back to love interest. I believe every good story has a love interest. Like love should be a central part of every single story out there. Like if you don't have love, you don't have heart. And if you don't have heart, nobody's going to read your stuff. So again, you want a villain, you want a hero, you want a sidekick or a best friend character, and you want a love interest. Those are the four characters that are in every single one of my works. Every single one. Like I always have those four characters. And, I hesitate to use the word villain because villain isn't really a good description. I would say opposing character. Now, the reason I would say opposing character is because not every opposing character is actually a villain. Because the villain is the person who keeps the main character from getting what he wants. All right. Now, if the main character is to get Lucy, and Lucy is the one keeping the main character from getting what he wants, that turns Lucy not only into the love interest, but also into the opposition character. So the opposition character isn't always a bad guy. It isn't always a villain. Sometimes the opposition character can be somebody very benign, like a boss, or a rival sporting team, or a contestant on a game show. It doesn't always have to be a villain. Doesn't always have to be a bad guy with evil intent, is what I'm saying. Okay, number 5, are there many genre moments? Now, whenever you're writing a story, you definitely, hands down, absolutely 100% must know your genre. Because if you don't know your genre, you're not going to know what to put in your story. And a lot of people, a lot of authors, I know they waffle on their genres. They go, well, it's a love story, but it's not really a love story. It's kind of more an action, but it's not really an action because it doesn't have X, Y, and Z. And it's not really a love story because this, and this. Let me tell you, it is crucial that you pin down your genre, because when you know your genre, that will tell you what to put in your story. Like, for example, if your genre is an action movie, then there's several things that need to be in an action movie: explosions, fist fights, gunfights, car chases. If you're writing an action and you don't have these things, your audience is going to be disappointed and let down. Like for romances, like the characters need to go on a few dates. There needs to be some kissy time. There needs to be some, maybe some sexual action going on there. There needs to be betrayals and stuff like that. And then comedy is the easiest because, there's only one thing you really need in comedy: jokes and laughs. If you're writing a comedy and you've gone 5 pages without telling a joke, you have failed, sir. So, and then like horror, like let's say you're writing a teen slasher, there's got to be like a number of teens, and each one, a decent way through the movie, has to get stabbed and killed. Like that is basically what you need in a teen slasher movie. And, your movie is going to be judged on the creativity of kills if it's a slasher teen movie. So you definitely need to know your genre, and you need to have those genre moments, because if you don't have the genre moments, then the people, your audience who, bought the movie or the book are going to be let down. Like, for example, Star Wars. There's several things that you need in a Star Wars film. You need lightsaber battles. You need laser gunfights. You need space dog fights. You need aliens. You need gigantic monsters trying to eat the heroes. And that's the genre moments that you would find in a Star Wars movie. So make sure you have those genre moments, because without those moments, your concept is dead in the water. Number 6, do you have an antecedent? Now, a lot of people don't know what an antecedent is. An antecedent is this. An antecedent is a movie that's like your movie. And if you can't find a book or a novel that's like your movie, you're in trouble. Because if your concept is so revolutionary, so new that no one's ever done it before, producers and publishing houses might not want to take that chance. If your book is, it's a love story from the point of view of an alien who loves himself on one planet and never interacts with any other human characters, and it's like, whoa, that's way, there is such a thing as too original. Now, producers have a saying, and the saying is this: we want the same thing, only different. All right. And, they don't want a carbon copy like The Force Awakens or Home Alone 2, but they want something that's been proven to work. That's why there's so many sequels and movies made off of books, because they know this IP sells and this story will sell no matter what we do. That's why there's so many sequels, prequels, books based on TV shows. Ooh, dang. What was that? I don't know what that is. I guess that's my light. But anyways, that's why there's so many prequels, sequels, and books made off of movies and stuff like that, because producers want to know, they have one question in their mind: will this sell? Because, movie producers, they're in a filmmaking business. Filmmaking is a business, and in businesses, the goals are to make money. But funnily enough, in filmmaking, the best stories will make the most money. So if you want to make the most money, you need to have the best story. And if you want to have a great story, you got to have a good concept. And all these things are things that you need for a really great concept. And the last thing down in the check your concept thing is, can you boil it down to one sentence? All right. Can you simplify your story into one sentence? Because a lot of the greatest stories can, like Big, a 10-year-old turns into a 35-year-old for a week. That's a good concept. Or like Liar, Liar, a lawyer has to tell the truth for 24 hours. That's a good concept. A League of Their Own. In the 50s, they try women's baseball and it's a success. That's a good concept. You want to have a really good concept. And sometimes your concept can be blank meets blank. Like, for example, the Event Horizon was The Shining in space. And then, Alien, the original Alien it's Jaws in space, so there's, and then, you can do like other stuff, like it's Batman meets Mr. Mom or stuff like that, So that is the stuff that I have for check your concept. Now, the second technique you can use to crush writer's block is to ask good questions. And I'm going to go over the 7 questions you should ask in order to have a really good concept. Now, the first question is, what are my character's quirks? And sometimes character's quirks can be called character rules. All right. A rule that a character has. Like, for example, Batman has his one rule. And the Dark Knight was entirely based around Batman's one rule. Batman's one rule is that he would not kill anybody. And the whole point of Joker's onslaught was to get Batman to break his one rule. And the outcome of the movie is, does Batman break his one rule or not? The new B&H is here. He says, what's up, XM Yak? Those are really helpful so far. Oh, thanks, Quattro. Shout out to Quattro. Shout out to New B&H. Shout out to Exum Vision. Shout out for Yakvo. So, yeah, and now characters, they don't always have to have rules, but they should have some quirks or the rules. Like in the last script that I wrote, one of the characters was very superstitious. And a lot of the other characters would antagonize her by breaking all the rules of bad luck. They would open an umbrella in her house. They gave her a black cat so the black cat could cross her path. They opened up a salt packet and poured it on the ground because, it's supposed to be bad luck that you, dump salt on the ground. And, they broke a mirror. So, when you have these rules, you can base an entire story around a character's rules. So you want to ask yourself, what are my character's quirks? What are the rules? And in another movie that I'm writing called Mr. Sniffles, the lead character is obsessed with rabbits. And everything that she does and everything that she owns is rabbit themed. Like even her car is a Volkswagen Rabbit, and the breakfast cereal that she eats is Trix because Trix has a rabbit on it, and she has rabbit bunny slippers. She has rabbit pajamas. Her favorite shows are Bugs Bunny, and, her favorite horror movie is Donnie Darko because there's a weird, creepy there's a weird, creepy rabbit in there. I know a chick named Rabbit. That's cool, B&H. She's a felon. All right. Okay. So the second question that you want to ask yourself is, what are the stakes? Now, in a story, the stakes should start low and then progressively get bigger and bigger. Because, like, let's say that, you have this giant intergalactic space war, and then the ending of your story is 2 characters in a knife fight. If you start out with, explosions and and space stations blowing up, and laser sword fights, and at the end of the movie your characters end with just a normal blade fight, that's going to let your characters down. So the stakes steadily need to progress, and they steadily need to rise. So that means don't start out with space stations and an intergalactic war and then end with a knife fight. That means start with a knife fight and then slowly progress to the intergalactic war, blown up space stations and stuff like that. She has Animaniac slippers, and she has multiple felony convictions. That's interesting. Nice. Okay, number 3, and you can base a whole story around this, is what is the main character's problem? Because if you find out what your character's main problem is, and that problem is enough to fill a whole story, then your movie basically becomes, does the character solve his problem or not? And then the end of the movie is when they solve the problem. If the main character's problem is that his mom needs a kidney operation to survive, then your whole story becomes, does she get the kidney or not? And it's a very simple way to plot out your story. And, between, him learning his mother has problems with her kidneys and then the operation, you have a whole slew of stuff that you could fill in for that story. And knowing your ending is key, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is, how can I make this more visual? Now, if you're writing a book or a story for a screenplay or movie, you really want your story to be visual. And I cannot think of any visual storyteller better than James Cameron. Can you send these tips to George R.R. Martin? I don't know. You can send him the link, Quattro. I give you full permission. Go ahead and send him the link, and let him know. But yeah. So can I make it more visual? Now, visuals are essential, not just in movies, but in books as well, because if a person can't see your book in their mind, then you've lost them. And, I can't think of a better movie than Terminator 2 Judgment Day, because Terminator 2 Judgment Day was such a high effort film. It was made nearly 30 years ago, and it still holds up today. And one of the main visuals that I think is so vivid and just gorgeous to behold was the scene where, the T-1000 is in the Pescadero Penitentiary, and, the cops walking along the checker floor. And then, as he walks off it, you see like a little skid mark on the floor. And then suddenly the floor rises up, and then it turns into the T-1000. And then the T-1000 turns into the security guard. The security guard turns around, and, the T-1000 shoots its spike finger through the guard's head, and, the paper cup drops to the ground. And those visuals were so beautiful and so amazing. And the thing is that James Cameron didn't have to do that. James Cameron could have just had the T-1000 come around the corner and, kill the cop. But he did something so visual and so beautiful. And that is the reason why James Cameron is not only one of the best writers, but one of the best directors, the best visual directors of all time. So when you're writing your story, you want to ask yourself, how can I make this more visual? Okay. Number 5, how can I use backstory for secondary characters? It doesn't matter how small your secondary characters are. If they have one line of dialogue, that's all you really need to create a backstory. For example, one of my favorite films is Lucy with Scarlett Johansson. Not only is Scarlett Johansson an absolute fox, Lucy, I think, is one of the greatest movies because so many of the secondary characters, the characters that only get like 2 or 3 lines, so many of those characters have maximum backstory in the amount of time that they're given. I remember Lucy, she's meeting with a gangster, and the gangster doesn't speak English. So he calls somebody who does, can translate Korean to English. And, you know, she says, do you speak English or don't you? And he's like, yes, I studied for 1 year at a college in New York. And that one sentence gives that character an entire backstory, and it makes the plot so much more flavorful and so interesting. It really does. And there's tons of that throughout the entire movie. Like the first person that Lucy talks to, there's this whole backstory about how they met, how they met in the school, and Lucy's studying for college, and they both have friends, and there's so much backstory packed into that one little scene, and that one little scene takes about a minute and a half to take place. Hi, Randy. What's up, Pretend Story? Pretend Story Times. What's going on? Shout out to Pretend Story Time. Did you see Avatar 2? Yeah, I saw Avatar 2 Quattro. I really did like it. But again, I will say that it was a 90-minute movie in a 3-hour movie's body. Like, there were a lot of scenes in that movie that could have been cut down, but it is a beautiful movie. I think it's the most beautiful movie of all time. Like, some of the directing and some of the shots in that movie. And again, James Cameron is the master at giving you fantastic shots and fantastic visuals. I mean, like, just watching the movie was a feast for the eyes. Like, if the visuals were sugar, I would have died of a diabetic coma. So the sixth story is, what do I like about this story or book? Now, this isn't about your concept, but this is about when you watch movies. When I personally watch movies or books, I'm not just reading for fun. I'm not just reading for enjoyment. I'm also asking myself, what do I like about this book, and why do I like it? And whenever you watch a movie or a book, like for the second or third or however many times you've seen it or watched it, ask yourself, what do I like about this book? Like, one of the things that I like about The Mentalist is that he uses pickpocketing to, achieve his aims. Sometimes he'll put like a key in somebody's pocket, and then later on he'll extract the key to like unlock a door, but he couldn't have that key in his pocket because he had to go through a metal detector. So he put the key in somebody else's pocket, like a cop's pocket. Then he went through the metal detector. And then on the other side, when the cop, said, okay, you're good, he pickpocketed the key. So the key didn't ping the metal detector. And I love those pickpocketing techniques that The Mentalist uses. And I use pickpocketing in some of my own scripts and screenplays. And the seventh and last question is, like unto it, is if you're watching a movie and you think it sucks and you think it's boring, ask yourself the question, why don't I like this? Why does this movie suck? And sometimes you can learn more from bad movies than you can learn from good movies. That's why I'll watch a lot of bad and stupid movies, is because you can say, well, the character doesn't have a clear-cut goal, so it's kind of boring, kind of meandering. So in my book, I'm going to have a character with a clear-cut goal. And then, like, why is this dialogue boring? Because these two characters are telling us everything that we've heard a dozen times before earlier in the story. So that's why this dialogue is boring. So now, that's why the dialogue is boring. So you can not make that mistake in your own work. All right. And that completes the Ask Good Questions. And now we come to the next way to crush writer's block. And a really good way to crush writer's block is to know your ending. Know your ending. And yes, what you're probably asking yourself, well, Randy, how do I know my ending in a story? I'm going to give you 7 different ways you can know your ending. And the first way to know your ending is, what is the main character's goal? All right. If you know your main character's goal, then your ending is a snap. Because I've been waiting. Did you send these tips to George R. Martin? I've been waiting for like 10 years for his next book. Yeah, all right. Okay, so when you know your character's goal, you know your ending, because your ending basically becomes, does he either get what he wants or not? Like if your character's goal is to get a kidney for his mom, the end of the story is, does the mom survive or not? You know, or for the ending of Kill Bill, I mean, the ending is in the title. You know, she wants to kill Bill. Does she kill Bill or doesn't she? You know, that's the thing, is like when your character has a clear-cut goal, you will know your ending. I mean, it's a snap. There's only like 6 endings that it could possibly be. It could be they get their goal, they don't get their goal, they don't get their goal, but but they learned a lesson, or it's a to be continued. So there's only a handful of ways. If you know what your character goals is, there's only like 4 or 5 or 6 ways that your story could end. And one way is to get what they want. Like if the character's looking for the kidney, he gets the kidney. Then the second way is they don't get what they want, but it's bad. So like the other ending could be, the guy doesn't get the kidney and his mom dies. And then another ending is they don't get what they want, but it's good. Like a character's goal for the story may be to kill himself once he makes $1,000. Well, in this instance, if he doesn't get what he wants, that's actually a good thing, because, he decides he wants to live and he has something to live for, and, he helps out a bunch of people. So sometimes the character not getting what he wants can be good. And then the 5th way is a cliffhanger, and personally, I don't like cliffhangers. The only cliffhanger I really liked was at the end of Empire Strikes Back. That was a good cliffhanger. But I personally don't like to end on cliffhangers because I think that's kind of a cop-out. There are a lot of good stories that do end on cliffhangers, but I'm not going to go through all those. And then number 6 way to know your ending is, what do you want the mood of the ending to be? Do you want the mood to be happy, or do you want the mood to be sad? All right. Now, if your character's goal is to, let's say, win the 500-yard dash, well, if you want the ending to be happy, the character has to win the 500-yard dash. If you want a sad ending, you could have, the character fails like halfway to the goal, or, he breaks his leg, or, he dies or has a heart attack or something on the way to the goal. So the mood you want of the ending will also determine your ending. And then number 7, the 7th way to know your ending is to have a thematic ending. Now, the theme of the ending of your story will determine your theme. All right. Like if you want to have the theme of drugs are bad, then at the end of the story, a main character is good, has to die because of drugs, or they have to go to prison for a long time because of drugs. So, like if your theme is drugs are bad, and then you have the characters succeeding by selling drugs, and they snort drugs and they win the Academy Awards, that is going to be contrary to your theme, and that's not going to be a good ending for your story. So if you are one of the writers who writes with themes and has theme in your story, your ending will dictate the theme of your story, or your theme will dictate the end of your story. So there we go. So that is know your ending. Now, the next way to crush writer's block is to write garbage. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Randy, write garbage. Why would I want to write garbage? Why would I want to write badly? Well, when you write garbage and when you write badly, you are coming up with material and ideas that you can fix later. That's one of the techniques later on, but here we go. Now, the first way to write badly is have the courage to write badly, because here's the thing. A lot of people have a lot of dumb ideas, and a lot of people have, stupid ideas, but sometimes dumb ideas and stupid ideas can be a good idea for a fantasy movie, or they can be a good idea for a comedy, Like I had the idea way, way, way before Ted came out of killer teddy bears taking over the White House. Now, Ted wasn't killer teddy bears taking over the White House, but it was a teddy bear coming to life, and it was a wisecracking teddy bear, and, did all this. But, sometimes stupid ideas and bad ideas, or what we think are stupid or bad ideas are actually really good ideas. And even the writer of The Social Network, Aaron Sorkin, and he did Moneyball as well, he looks for bad ideas. He actually tells the students, okay, I want 10 bad ideas from each of you, and we're going to go along, and I want you to each shout out your bad idea when I call upon you. Becky, what's your bad idea? Teddy bears take over the White House. Ted, what's your bad idea? An android falls in love with a toaster. Okay, Greg, what's your bad idea? A guy who farts saves the universe. Stuff like that. You got to have the courage to write badly, because sometimes after you come up with so many bad ideas, eventually you're going to stumble over and trip over a really good idea in disguise. And I don't know, you might see that teddy bears take over the White House story coming pretty soon. Maybe I could write Ted 3 and that's what it could be about. So number 2, under Write Garbage is remember the principle of drafts, versions, and editions. And here's the thing. You really want to put your book out, even if you don't think it's up to snuff, even if you think it's not good enough, because you need to remember there are versions and there are editions. And everything you get wrong in the first edition, you can fix in the second edition. And another thing you want to keep in mind is no first drafts are perfect. So just keep in mind, you can always fix what you do later. Like, for example, the version of Star Wars that's available on Amazon and Disney Plus, that version was not the original version. There have been many, many, many different redos and versions of the original Star Wars movies, and the movies that are out today are not on the movies that are out today were not the original versions. They have been fixed and they have done several things. So the third technique on how to write garbage is write a crappy book and then fix it. All right. That is one way to write. Now, here's the thing is that you can't improve on something that doesn't exist. If you write a crappy book, you can always fix it, and again, remember the principles of drafts and editions as you go throughout your story and your book. Remember that is not the final edition, and very rarely are first drafts anything but crap. Ernest Hemingway said himself, the first draft of anything is crap. And he actually didn't say crap. He actually used a more colorful word, but there you go. Number 4th technique on how to write garbage is called what I call the BBB file. And the BBB file works like this. Okay, let's say you're 3/4 through your ending, 3/4 through your story, and you can't think of an ending. Here is the technique that I use. I use what's called a BBB file. So what I do is if I'm stuck on a story, I save my story in whatever program I'm using. Then I save the story again with parentheses, BBB, close parentheses. So now I have a copy of my story that I can totally edit, that I can totally do whatever I want to do with it. And even if that ending sucks and it's not the ending I want, I can go back to the original file and I still have the original file without all the changes and all the endings. And you can do this for an infinite amount of time. You can do a CCC file, you can do a DDD file, you can do an EEE file, and you can have choice and you can pick your endings. You can write multiple endings, and there are movies that do have multiple endings. Like, for example, the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes had about 5 alternate endings. All right. And the last Indiana Jones movie and the Dial of Destiny, that has had multiple endings as well. Number 5 is a technique I call screen dump. And basically a screen dump is this. You open your word processor, You maximize the file on the computer, and you literally write the longest block of text that you possibly can. You can use multiple sentences, but you have to literally fill up the entire screen with words. And that's a lot of words. I mean, if you're writing in 12-point font and you've got the your word processor full screen, that's a lot of words. And there's several like little prompts. You can like Google like writing prompts, and it'll give you writing prompts on what to write about. But if you write so much, number one, it's going to warm up your engines. You are going to want to write more. And number two, sometimes in these screen dumps, sometimes you come up with really, really good ideas, and sometimes you come up with like really good snippets of dialogue. And, my advice is to go as crazy and as bizarre and as insane as possible, because throughout those like little screen dumps, you'll come up with little nuggets. You'll have like little, you'll have, a good piece of dialogue here, a good piece of description there, maybe a good concept out of one of the sentences. So take a screen dump, maximize your browser, write, and fill up the entire screen with words. Do not use paragraphs. Do not indent. It should be a solid block of text across your entire screen. Try it out. I use it. It's a good technique. Test it out. And number 6, remember, famous writers write many drafts, and no draft is perfect. We touched upon this earlier. But remember, no first draft is perfect. I mean, if you're hiring a screenwriter to write you a screenplay, you should keep in mind that no first draft is perfect. No screenplay is perfect. No first draft of a novel is perfect. And shooting for perfection is going to stall you, and it's going to put you in writer's block. So remember, no first draft is perfect. And Hemingway wrote one of his famous novels, Farewell to Arms. He said he worked on the ending, and he said he wrote about 37 to 39 different drafts of the ending to Farewell to Arms. And remember Hemingway's famous quote, "The first drafts of anything are crap." He didn't use the word crap, but if Hemingway's first drafts are crap, then why should your first drafts be, pure gold? A lot of people don't just crap out gold nuggets all the time. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen. And the last thing that you should remember when you're writing is remember that writing stories is a crapshoot. Nobody has the secrets. Nobody, no author, no Oscar-winning writer, no award-winning writer, none of them have the secrets to writing a good book. None of them have the secrets to writing a good script or screenplay. Martin Scorsese has done a few boring movies. Steven Spielberg has written a few dumb and boring movies. Stephen King has written some dumb and boring novels. No matter, you can think of the best writer on the planet, every single writer has things that fell flat on their face, did not work. Writing is a crapshoot. So you really want to put your work out there because, you have no idea. Nobody has no idea what works and what doesn't work. Nobody has a consistent way to write Oscar-winning screenplays. No one has a consistent way of writing best-selling books. Writing is a crapshoot. Sometimes something works, sometimes it doesn't. You just got to put your book out there, and, sometimes it's going to be a bestseller. Sometimes people are going to say, hey, this looks like it should be a BuzzFeed article. You never know. So you might as well suck it up, push through your writer's block, and get it done and get it out there. So the next way to crush writer's block is to add conflict. Now, you might be asking yourself, Randy, why do you need conflict? Well, the simple answer is this. Happy, happy, happy makes for a boring story. Like, I'll give you an example. I go to a writer's group, and there was this one writer. His name was, we'll just call him Bob. And Bob wrote these stories that were so painfully boring. And again, remember that last question on the ask questions part of the thing is like, I asked myself, why is this so boring? And the reason his stories were so boring is because it was happy, happy, happy all the time. You need conflict in your stories. Conflict is what makes a story interesting. Because Bob's stories were like this. It was like, oh, I went to my daughter's birthday party and it was great. And we had cake and we had ice cream and everybody had a really good time. They opened presents. There were tons of presents for everybody. Nikki got a race car. Bobby got a balloon. Todd got, a pair of socks. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is so boring. Now, there was one story that started out like this. We shoot the white girl first. That is 6 words, but just those 6 words were fantastic compared to Bob's entire 3-page story. And why? Because those 6 words are dripping with conflict. That first sentence makes you want to read the entire rest of the book, because we know this writer knows how to hook you. And you really want a great first sentence, because a great first sentence hooks you. And me personally, I don't even read past the first or second page when I'm in a bookstore, because I can tell right off the bat, okay, does this writer know how to hook me in with the first sentence? Because if you don't have a hook for the first sentence, I can tell you're not a good writer. If you can't hook me with that first sentence, I mean, right there, I know you're not serious about the craft. You don't know how to write. Like, good writers will hook you within the first sentence, and at the most, they'll hook you with the first paragraph. So there you go. So number 2 point on adding conflict is conflict does not mean gunfights. Conflict does not mean explosions. Conflict does not mean sword fights. Sometimes, number 3, conflict can be just an argument. Like conflict can be a disagreement or a debate. Conflict doesn't have to be, punching and stabbing people and shooting people and setting people on fire. Conflict can be an argument. And number 4, conflict can be a goal just not being met. Like one of the things that I use as an example is from the book How to Write Your First Play. And in How to Write the First Play, the first chapter, it talks about this artist. He sets up an easel on stage, and then the easel falls over. And then he tries to set the easel back up again, and then the easel falls over again. So then he tries to prop it up with a chair, but that doesn't work. And then he tries to tie it up to the chair, and that doesn't work. So sometimes conflict doesn't even need to be an argument. You don't even need another person in the room for conflict. Conflict can just be a goal not being met. So conflict doesn't have to be a fist fight. It doesn't even have to be an argument if you don't want it to. It could just be a goal that is not being met that your character tries to meet. Number 5, conflict is a direct result of your MDQ. Now, what's an MDQ? An MDQ is a major dramatic question. You'll find this in the 38 most common fiction writing mistakes by I believe it's by Dwight Swain, I believe, but it's called the 38 most common fiction writing mistakes. And your statement of intent is going to tell you what the conflict is. Like, for example, if somebody says, I want to sink that sub, then the major dramatic question becomes, will they sink the sub? And your entire story will be characters going throughout that story trying to sink the sub. And, sometimes they'll try to succeed and they'll miss, or they'll try this plan and that plan fails. And then they sink the sub, but there's another sub they have to sink. So now the main question becomes, will they sink that other sub? In Terminator 2, again, which is one of the greatest films of all time, in Terminator 2, there are several main dramatic questions throughout the story. Like the first story is, the first question is, which Terminator will get to John Connor first? And then the main dramatic question comes, will they break Sarah Connor out? And then the main drama becomes, can they prevent Judgment Day by killing Miles Dyson? And then the last one becomes, will John Connor survive the fight with the T-1000? And then it becomes, will they kill the T-1000? So there's many main dramatic questions throughout that story that keep the story, fluid and moving and going in a quick progression. And then the number seventh way to add conflict is personify your conflict through an antagonist. Again, I said it once and I'll say it again. Your screenplay or your story needs to have an antagonist. Again, antagonist doesn't always mean a bad guy. It doesn't always mean a bad guy. Sometimes it can be an opposing character. It can be someone who keeps the main character from getting what he wants. But if you really want to spice up your story, if you're really blocked and you don't have an antagonist, adding an antagonist is one way to keep your plot moving and keeping it fluid and going. So that ends the bit on add conflict. The next way to crush writer's block is to incubate. All right. And incubate is a very important process of any idea generating system. And you might be asking yourself, well, Randy, what does incubate mean? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Incubate is this. Incubate means doing something else and letting your subconscious work on the problem. So sometimes you're writing. You've been writing your ass off the entire day. Sometimes you need to just stop, pull back, and you need to just let your mind rest. Sometimes you need to take a break for an hour. Sometimes you need to take a break for a day. Sometimes you need to take a break for a week. And your subconscious, your mind asks questions in your mind. And your subconscious, if you have a clear, focused question, your subconscious will go to work on that question. And then one day the answer will just, boom, it'll just come to you. If you have a clearly formulated question in your mind and you do something else, your subconscious, eventually one day, you're going to be driving down the street and you're going to be like, oh my God, that's it. And you're going to have to pull over to the side of the road and take the notes. One way to incubate is formulate a specific question. What is the problem? The problem is I don't have a way for character to get from point A to point B. So your question in your mind is, how does character get from point A to point B? You go to sleep, you ask your subconscious to give you a dream about it, and 9 times out of 10, your character, darn it, I've got the Wi-Fi bars. I hope this is coming out to all y'all. So in your mind, ask your brain a question, ask it to produce a dream, and let it work on that for you. And then number 3 is to take a shower. If you want to incubate, some of people's best ideas come in the shower. So, ask yourself a question, take a shower, do whatever you do in there, wash your body, scrub your hair, take a long time, turn it on really hot, not too hot. You don't want to scald yourself. But sometimes taking a shower works. Sometimes going for a long walk in nature works. Now, going for a long walk in nature is really good because it clears your mind. And I always love taking long walks in nature because, number 1, it's good exercise. Number 2, if you don't take your phone with you, nobody can get to you. Nobody can interrupt you. And occasionally there'll be pedestrians on the street that you might want to talk with. But if you take a long hour-long walk, it's going to clear your head. You're going to come up with new ideas. New questions are going to come in your mind and new ideas. And taking a long walk is really good. And number 5 is sometimes all it takes is time. You might be blocked and You know, your idea might come, 10 minutes from now, your idea might come a year from now. But sometimes all you need to do is just take a break and, just give your mind time to mull things over. Just give your mind a little bit of a break. And then number 6 is work on another project. Like if you're writing a certain story, break that story off and work on a different project. And that was something that David S. Goyer was blocked when he was writing The Dark Knight Rises. And Christopher Nolan, the writer and director of The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, he said, you know what, David? Do what I do. Take a break, work on something else. And guess what? David Goyer did work on something else. He worked on Superman, Man of Steel. And, David S. Goyer said, well, I had a lot of ideas for Superman. And like Chris was like, you know what, David, take a shot at it. Maybe I can pitch it to WB. Maybe we can make it work. So David S. Goyer took a break on that project, wrote Man of Steel. And then he got the ideas he needed for The Dark Knight Rises. He finished The Dark Knight Rises. And then their next film right after that was Man of Steel. So sometimes breaking off one project and working on another can get your wheels turning. And, sometimes you'll be able to complete a totally different story. And then not only will you have that story done, well, eventually you'll get ideas for this story and you'll complete that story too. And then you'll have two stories finished and completed. So it's a 2-for-1 deal. So that's pretty cool. And then 7, if all else fails, don't even look at it. Shelve it for a week. Don't take a look at it. Don't look at it for a week. Don't even think about it. Try your best to focus on something else. Take a shower, have a meal, go play tennis, go for a run around the park. Do whatever you want to do. Don't even think about it for an entire week. And then after a week is done, take it out, dust it off, and read it over with fresh eyes. And if you do that, sometimes, you'll be like, oh, well, I wasn't thinking of this. And be like, oh, well, I tell the characters about this character, but I never actually say what he looks like. Or, oh, you know what? I never actually told why X does Y or why X does Z. So maybe I should flesh that out. And then, if all else fails, show it to a beta reader. Okay. And this is the last way to crush writer's block. And this is get the nutrients you need. Now, notice that I didn't say go for nutrition or go for something nutritious, because sometimes the nutrients you need are not good. And I'm going to go over the 7 nutrients that you could need to kickstart your writing brain into gear. So the first ingredient is sugar. Sometimes you will need a little sugar to kickstart your brain to get it moving. Sometimes all you need is like a cinnamon bun, or sometimes all you need is a chocolate bar, or sometimes all you need is, like a little fruity drink, So sometimes all you need is a little nutrients to get your brain going, to get the gears in gear. Number 2, caffeine. I know a lot of people are going to fight me on this, but caffeine is a good way to get your motor running, because your brain is just like an engine. It needs fuel. It's just like a car. It needs fuel. It needs stuff to get going. And if you haven't eaten anything for a long time, and if you hadn't had anything to drink for a long time, that right there may be your problem in a nutshell. And number 3, the next one is carbs. I know a lot of people are against carbs, like, oh, I don't want any carbs. I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want to get fat. Sometimes carbs are what you need. Sometimes carbs are the thing that can jumpstart and get your motor going. And then number 4 is taurine. If you can't do sugar, if you can't do caffeine, taurine is a good source. Hello, Larry Tate. What's up? Taurine is a good source of nutrition and nutrients. Taurine, and these are Monster energy drinks. I get the white Monster energy drinks because these have no sugar and they only have 10 calories in them right there. They have no sugar, no caffeine, but the energy comes from taurine, and taurine also gets your mind working, also gets your mind in gear. And taurine in Japan is known as the longevity molecule because the Japanese live longer than most everybody on the planet. And there is a lot of taurine in Chinese food. There's a lot of taurine in Monsters. There's a lot of taurine in energy drinks like Red Bull. And sometimes to get your motor running, you need a little taurine. Number 5, water. You definitely need to be hydrating yourself. Water is essential. And I read a report. I don't remember where I read it, but they said just a 5% drop in dehydration can cause a 10% drop in your cognitive functioning. So if you're dehydrated and you're dehydrated like 15%, that means that you're around like 45% decrease in your cognitive function. So definitely drink as much water as humanly possible. Not too much because you don't want to make yourself sick. I would go around two 8-ounce glasses of water every hour for 5 hours. That is how much water I would drink if I wanted to stay hydrated. And I do. And I'm going to get some water right after this. Number 6. And again, I know a lot of you are going to fight me. I know a lot of you are going to argue with me. But I find that I write really well and that I have a lot of motivation to write and a lot of motivation after these last 2 items. The last 2 items are pizza. I got to tell you, if I have like 3 or 4 slices of pizza, that gets my writer's brain motivated. It gets it going. Same thing for Monsters. But the last thing on my list, and this is a big one, is coffee. And the thing that's beautiful about coffee is that there are so many different kinds of coffee. There's a cornucopia of different varieties. What about doing drugs? Quattro says. Well, Quattro, I will say this. If I ever did drugs, it would be purely for a writerly aspirations. Like if I ever drank like alcohol, like Jack Daniels or like Fireballs or anything, I would immediately want to be at a typewriter. Now, I personally do not endorse drugs and alcohol. I don't do drugs and alcohol. I do tons of vitamins, as you can see over here. I've got a boatload of vitamins. And if you want me to do a vlog about vitamins, I'll do a vlog about vitamins and which ones are good for the brain and which ones are good for energy and which ones are good for that stuff. But aside from, I know you're being kind of snarky and sarcastic, Quattro, but that's actually a really good question. Because, there are a lot of writers and there are a lot of screenwriters who do use drugs specifically to create their works. Like, for example, David Chappelle, he writes screenplays and he smokes a lot of weed when he writes screenplays. Same things with Seth Rogen and James Franco. When they wrote, Pineapple Express, they said they smoked a lot of weed. And then Kevin Smith is a wild writer. He comes up with a lot of crazy and weird stuff. Kevin Smith also says that he smokes a lot of weed to come up with his concepts. And he says he smokes a lot of weeds to come up with a lot of his scripts. And he says his best ideas come up when he's smoking weed. But again, I don't endorse drugs. I don't do drugs. All the drugs are either prescribed to me or vitamins. As you can see right there, I've got boatloads of vitamins. But also on the topic of alcohol, there were a lot of famous alcoholic writers. One of the greatest writers of all time, Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was a rampant alcoholic, and it may have been good for his writing, but he had a very tempestuous relationships with his family. you know? So he may have been one of the best writers of all times, and alcohol may have had a part in that. But I do believe they said it ruined Ernest Hemingway's relationships. So doing drugs, can it make you more creative? The short answer is yes. But the long answer is, personally, I would not do drugs or alcohol to write. But if I did, I would definitely want to write while I was high or while I was drunk. You know, I always thought it would be cool to like get really drunk and then, you know, write something and then like wake up in the morning and be like, who the hell wrote this? I don't remember any of this crap. Oh my God, this is good. But there you go. And then the last item on my list is coffee. And again, I actually already mentioned coffee, but the thing that's beautiful about coffee is there's so many ways that you can take coffee. It's insane. You know, you can have sugar, you can have it with cinnamon, you can have it with nutmeg, you can have iced coffee, you can have hot coffee, you can have Folgers. There's so many different coffee brands. There's so many different things you can put in it. You can put ice cream in it. You know, you can have it blended, you know. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with coffee. And when I drink coffee, I like to have like chocolate syrup in it and lots of sugar and, maybe have, some nutmeg. You know, there's so much things you can do with coffee. And coffee is, I find, the more cups of coffee I have, the more creative I am. But I do have a warning with this one. Be careful of your heart. With all these things, be careful of your heart, because too much caffeine, too much sugar, too much of anything on this list is bad for you. In fact, too much of anything is bad for you. There are limits to just about everything that you can eat or drink. You know, you want to do it in moderation. Okay, now those were the 7 ways to crush writer's block, but I did 7 ways to crush writer's block and 7 points for each of those 7. But now I am going to do a thing which I call freebies. And these freebies are extra ways to crush writer's block that really didn't fit into any of the itemized lists that I showed you. So, and I have 8 freebies. So now I'm going to go over the freebies right now. But I just want to let you know, if y'all have a question, I'm going to just type it in. If you all have a question, let her rip. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to show that. So there we go. So I'm going to finish up. I wanted to go for 90 minutes. We still have about 23 more minutes to go, but I think these 8 freebies will take up a long time. But if you have a question, let her rip in the chat. If it's a decent question and not a trolley question, I will do my best to answer it. So yeah, go ahead, and if you got a question on writing, let her rip. Otherwise, I'm going to go over the freebies. So number 1, if you are a screenwriter, the number 1 thing that I would do is I would read a bunch of screenplays. And don't just read screenplays that you find on the internet. Read screenplays to movies that you've already seen. Because here's the thing, when you read screenplays of movies you've already seen, you're going to see that there are some discrepancies against the actual screenplay and what was put on to film. Because one of the movies that was actually good, but was a horrible movie, was Catwoman. You can go on this one website, and I'm going to give you the website in a bit, but the original screenplay for Catwoman was actually pretty good. And yes, I am talking about the Halle Berry Catwoman. If I was Halle Berry and I read the original screenplay to Catwoman, I would have said yes to it too, because there was a ton of stuff in that screenplay that got changed, jumbled up, moved around. Some of the good plot points were deleted. I have no idea why. But, the original ending of Catwoman took place on a rooftop with a helicopter, and the helicopter flies away and then it explodes. And, Catwoman, is the savior of the city. So the original Catwoman screenplay with Halle Berry was actually pretty good. And, again, if you read screenplays that you've seen in the theater, you can see, this line, they improvised this line. This line wasn't in the screenplay. or, oh, this scene wasn't in the original screenplay, or, oh, this character didn't say X, Y, and Z in the screenplay. He said A, B, and C. So there you go. So the number 2 tip on my freebies is to go to Drew's Scriptorama. If you are a screenwriter, you should be going to Drew's Scriptorama about 4 or 5 times every month, because Drew's Scriptorama is a free website, and the site is pretty cool. It has an old version and a new version. The new version just has a lot more bells and whistles and looks prettier. But the old version is, if you have a crappy computer and you don't want to use up a lot of your bandwidth, you can go to the old version. But Drew's Scriptorama is a great place to find screenplays for movies, for TV movies, and they even have a section devoted to cartoon screenplays and normal writers who haven't sold any screenplays yet. So that is an excellent website. Drew's Scriptorama is a great website, and I definitely recommend checking out, especially if you're a screenwriter or want to be a writer. You definitely need to read, because you cannot be a writer without reading. If you're not reading, if you're trying to write a 365-page novel and you can't make it 22 pages into a book, you are not going to be a good writer. If you're trying to write a 120-page screenplay and you can't read a 22-page script, your brain is a little bit fried, and you need to read more. Because what books should I read? Quattro, that is a good question. I'll give you a few right now. I would read anything by Sid Field. Sid Field has a few good books out. Sid Field wrote The Elements of Screenwriting. That's a good one. He also wrote another book called 4 Screenplays, where he breaks down Thelma and Louise, Terminator 2, Silence of the Lambs, and there's another movie in there that I can't think of, but he takes you through and shows you how they use structure and how they did that. And then another good book on screenwriting books, Quattro, is The Screenwriter's Problem Solver by Sid Field. That is another good book. It's broken up into 3 sections, and each section tackles a different problem-solving thing. But if you want to read screenplays, Quattro, I would read anything by Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction was pretty good. I've got that on paperback. Reservoir Dogs was pretty good. I've got that on paperback. And again, the thing about reading screenplays that you've seen is anything that you've read, anything that you've seen, when you read the actual screenplay, you're going to see that there were differences and discrepancies from printed page to finished screens. Any thoughts on the Chinese balloon? Larry Tate, I do not know what that is. Explain what the Chinese balloon is in the chat. But yeah, so I'm going to go on to number 4, read books in your genre. If you are a writer of novels, you need to read. All right. You need to read books. Because again, like I said, if you can't get 22 pages into a novel or book or a screenplay, and you're trying to write a 365-page novel or a 120-page screenplay, you are going to find it very cumbersome and very difficult. But, you need to press on. But for novels that I would read The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. I would read Deception Point by Dan Brown, Digital Fortress by Dan Brown, Origin by Dan Brown. As you can see, I'm a big Dan Brown fan. And then I would take, if you like to write action, I would read any of the Jack Reacher books by Lee Child. If you want to write horror and fantasy, I would read anything by Stephen King, especially books that have made it into the theaters, like It and Cell and Sleepwalkers, and any Stephen King movie that you've seen, I would read the book too. Okay, so the 5th freebie is this. If there are deleted scenes in a movie or book, you can use those. You don't have to write all original stuff. If you want to use a deleted scene or like a little snippet that was never used in a movie or something, those are fair game. You can use those. And I'll give you a really famous example. A famous example is from X-Men. And in the original 2000 movie of X-Men, they showed a backstory element where Cyclops, he was in his bathroom stall, bullies were beating on the stall, and then he opens his eyes and he blasts a hole in the school. That plot point was deleted in X-Men that came out in 2000. But guess what? Somebody read that scene, said, you know what? This is a really good scene. We should use this. And the writer of X-Men Apocalypse took that scene almost word for word and used it in a later version of X-Men called X-Men Apocalypse. So if you want to take a deleted scene, or if you want to use like a plot point that wasn't used from a different movie, you can use that plot point. You know, like it wasn't in the final story. So, hey, if you want to use it, you can recycle it. You know, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. Quattro Bagina says, that's crazy. Yakvo says, where's the dude? I don't know, Yakvo. Get him in here if you want to. Number 6, and a lot of people ask, I get a lot of DVDs. I have a ton of DVDs, as you can see in the background. I've got even more in front of me on my desk. I've got about probably 400 DVDs in my collection. And a lot of people ask me, well, Randy, why don't you just buy it on digital, you know, watch it on your laptop or watch it on your Roku box? Here is why I get DVDs. Number 1, deleted scenes and director's commentary. Okay. Yakvo says, what is your absolute favorite Fears video? I gotta say, my favorite Fears video is The Deal. Fears made The Deal 1, which was about a gangster making a deal about, you know, a stupid Power Rangers video. And I thought it was hilarious. And I actually took the deal and I inserted myself into it. And I made The Deal 1.5 and The Deal 2.5. Yakvo is, I need a part 3. And Yakvo, I've actually written a Deal part 3. And it takes the characters from The Deal part 1 and part 2. And I find a cool way to bring back characters that died in The Deal 2. And I do think, Yakvo, we do need to complete the trilogy. We do need to complete the trilogy. And personally, I want to be the one to complete the trilogy. I'll let Fears direct it because it's his baby. But yeah, I definitely think we need a Deal 3. It was a spy balloon from China that flew across North America. Our military finally shot it down. Damn, that's crazy. I don't have any comment on that, but I did not hear that. But that is interesting. You know, I mean, like personally, if I was China, I would have put a self-destruct thing on that balloon, and I would have had the balloon blow up. But yeah. So yeah, number 6 is listen to director's commentary, because directors, and this goes for director's commentary, or basically goes for podcasts, is in a lot of commentary and podcasts, there are stories within stories. Like, for example, when Kevin Smith was on a podcast and he was talking about a crazy story about this guy in Canada who was asking for people to pretend they were a baby seal because he was on a deserted island. Baby seal was his best friend, and then he got off the deserted island and he came to the city, and he's really lonely. He doesn't have any friends. So he was interviewing people to pretend they were that baby seal. And that podcast got so much ratings and so much hits on it that eventually Kevin Smith decided, you know what? I need to make this letter a movie. This needs to be a movie. This needs to be something I actually do. And that movie came from the podcast, and eventually that movie became the movie that we all know today with Justin Long, called Tusk. It was crazy. And I believe Red State by Kevin Smith also was based on another one of his podcasts. But, when people are talking about stories, sometimes it's like a Russian doll. There's stories within stories. Sometimes a guy might be talking about his life, and then he might talk about that time he was kicked out of a casino because he looked just like George Clooney, and George Clooney was banned from that casino. And throughout that entire diatribe, you can take that one little snippet of what happened to that guy's life, and you can build an entire story on that. Like, one of my friends has also written a book, and I remember she was talking about, her uncle, and there was a little snippet, that was only one sentence long, that goes, yeah, and my uncle, was in a prison in Somalia, and then he broke out and came to America. I was like, dude, Gail, that one little sentence, he broke out from a prison, went to America, and began a new life. That entire one little sentence could be an entire story unto itself. Like, what did he go to jail for? What happened to him in jail? Why? How did he break out? How did he cross the border to America? It's like that little one sentence, that little snippet from your story could be the basis for an entire movie. All right. I was the one who shot it down, says Yakvo. Nice shot, Yakov. That's the 14th balloon. Yeah. 14 shot instead of 88, if you know what I mean. What did George Clooney do? George Clooney didn't do anything. I was just using that as an example. All right. And then the seventh freebie that I'm going to give out is get yourself a beta reader. Now, what is a beta reader? A beta reader is somebody who will proofread or read your work and give you their thoughts. And there are tons and tons and tons of beta readers on Fiverr. You can ask people to do script coverage. You can ask for a beta reader. You can ask for a proofreader, and they will give you tips on how to improve your story. They'll give you a general consensus of what an audience might think. And you can get tons of beta readers for very cheap on Fiverr. You can get them from anywhere from $5 to $80 to $100. But, getting a fresh pair of eyes on your screen is very interesting. What did he do? I think he overordered free shrimp and abused the waitress when she tried to cut him off, or when she tried to cut him. Yeah. I originally thought that's what you said. Then I read the off, but yeah, that'd be funny if a waitress tried to cut George Clooney. Get away from me, George Clooney. I'll cut you. And I actually realized I missed one of the points on my freebies, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. The third freebie we did, one was read screenplays you've seen. 2 is get a Drew script drama. 3 is get a writer's group. 4 is read books in your genre. 5, recycle deleted scenes. 6 is listen to director's commentary. 7 is get yourself a professional beta reader on Fiverr. So 3 kind of goes in hand with 7. Now, I would definitely suggest going to a writer's group for multiple reasons. There are tons and tons and tons of reasons you should go to a writer's group. Number one, they're cheap. Some writers groups are free. Some writers groups are very niche groups. Like some have mental health writers groups. Some people have novelist writers groups. Some people have published authors writing groups. Some people have screenwriters writing groups. You can go to just about any library there is, and you will be able to see writers groups. This might be too. Oh shit! Don't even go there, Larry. I can keep up. Don't start. All right. But yeah, writers groups are amazing because, again, there are niche writers groups to wherever you are. You can go to just about any library or civic center, and there are writers groups. Again, some of them are pretty cheap. The one I go to is completely free. All the writers there, including myself, are published authors. And you can get a lot of free food at writers groups. All you have to do is kick $2.50 in for dues. And then you have unlimited coffee. A lot of the writers bring snacks. I mean, like the writers groups that I go to, there are tons of writers who bring like, muffins and banana bread and cookies and scones. And, if it's somebody's birthday, occasionally they bring cake, and again, you get free coffee. Coffee is amazing, and coffee gets the mind working and the wheels turning. And, typically what happens at my writers group, and I'm going there tomorrow actually, is typically what happens is you bring in several copies of your work. Like you would bring about like 7 or 8 copies of a chapter that you're working on, and then you hand it out. And then typically in my writers group, we go in the order that you showed up. So if I come in first and then Jim comes in second and then Darlene comes in first, it goes me, then Jim, then Darlene. If Darlene comes from first and then it's Jim and then it's the other Jim, we go Darlene, Jim, and Jim. So, that's the order that usually goes in. And, you bring in about like 3 or 4 pages. And again, you make copies for everybody and then make sure you do the line numbers so people can tell you which line they're talking about when they read it. And then once you're done, we just go around the table and everybody, gives about like 3 to 10 minutes of critiques and comments, what they liked, what they didn't like. And it's really cool because one thing about writers groups is you have to read your work out loud. And here's the thing, when you read your work out loud, sometimes you read it differently than when you wrote it. Like sometimes instead of that of, you'll say of that. And then you'll find out like transposing those words work better. And when you read your work out loud, the other readers around the table will be like, well, Randy, when you said this sentence, you dropped the word that. And I think without the word that, I think that is stronger. I think dropping the word that is stronger than what you read. And, again, you get tons of input. And, and if you go into a writer's group where you have published authors or people who have been writing for a really long time, sometimes you can mine really deep and really insightful insights. So before we did 3, we left off on 7, get a professional beta reader. And the last comment that I had is don't be afraid to share your work. All right. Don't be afraid to share your work. Oh, hold on. Same groups even have giveaways, cool stuff. Yeah. Again, I highly recommend writers groups if you haven't tried them. There's a Toastmasters groups here that kind of works like a writer's guild. Yeah, and they'll teach you how to do public speaking and work on your intonation and your pauses and stuff. So yeah, Toastmasters is a really good group, and you'll have to write something to speak at Toastmasters. So yeah, any input that you can get from Toastmasters is great. Again, writers groups are fantastic, and I suggest them to anybody who hasn't tried them. Try one, at least try 2 if you're adventurous. And again, writers groups are just a good way to get out and meet new people and meet like-minded people who are interested in the same thing that you're interested in, which is writing. It's not about toast as in the cooked bread. Yeah, I know what Toastmasters is. Toastmasters is like toast, and then you got to give a speech, and you read the speech in front of people, and they give you like little grades. Butter generally, some people use jam, but I think that's hack. Yeah, right. So yeah, Toastmasters is good. And like I said, try out 2 writers groups. If you try 2 and you don't like them, quit them. But, oh, no, it is about toast. Oh, dang. Well, then I go for my favorite kind of toast is either buttered with strawberry jam or I go with peanut butter on toast. Those are traditionally the way I take my toast. Or another way I take my toast is I put pesto on it. You ever had pesto on toast? Oh, man, that's amazing. Larry says, this is the Toastmasters. Larry says, LOL. That's cool. So, yeah. Ever do honey and peanut butter? No, but that does sound good. That does sound good. So the last freebie on my list is this. Don't be afraid to share your work. All right. Don't be afraid to share your work. When I write screenplays for people on Fiverr.com, a lot of people are afraid of me stealing their idea. Ideas are very rarely, if ever, stolen in Hollywood. There is very rarely, if ever, is a script stolen word for word with the exact same concept, with the same dialogue. It very rarely, if ever, happens. And you can tell a screenwriter or person's level of professionalism by how afraid they are that their idea is going to get stolen. Because it breaks down like this. In Hollywood, if you steal a screenplay and you make a movie for, like, let's say even on the low end, let's say you steal a screenplay and then you make it for $40,000, and then somebody says, oh no, that was my screenplay, then that movie company is going to get sued $40 million plus some change if the person is vindictive. And it is so much easier to make an idea that's like that idea than to actually pirate and take somebody else's screenplay. People getting their screenplay stolen rarely, if ever, happens. Very rarely. Because, I mean, producers know, and they're perfect, real Hollywood producers and real companies know that it's so much safer to just put your own version out, you know? Like, I mean, and this happened a lot in the 90s, is, you know, like, a guy had an idea, well, a comet is going to hit planet Earth in 90 days. Well, you know, like Deep Impact came out and then Armageddon came out. Those are the same concept, but one was a heck of a lot better than the other one. You know, Armageddon was way better than Deep Impact. Had a lot better director, had a lot better actors. But your basic idea, your like one sentence idea of like, a volcano erupts in LA. That basic idea can be stolen. But when you write for Hollywood, what they're looking at is the finished product. They're not looking at the final idea. They're looking at the finished product. Because here's the thing. A great concept does not guarantee a good story. Some stories have really boring concepts, but are really well told. Like, for example, As Good as It Gets is a really boring story. It's about a snarky writer who falls in love with a waitress. Yeah, it's Oscar-winning stuff, right? Well, guess what? It was Oscar-winning because the writing was amazing, the acting was amazing, the directing was amazing, and the execution of that movie was fantastic. And it did win Academy Awards. And, you know, and it got Jack Nicholson. It got, Greg Kinnear. It got a lot of high-level actors. And it turned out to be a really good movie, but As Good as It Gets is a really boring concept. Like, if you pitch me, like, a snarky waiter falls in love with a waitress, I'd be like, who gives a shit? I don't care. Sounds dumb. I don't like it. But that's the thing, is concept does not guarantee a movie will be good, because sometimes good movies can be made from bad concepts. Now, if you have an idea, like, again, a volcano erupting in LA, that kernel of idea, you know, Edison said that he really didn't have any new ideas. He just persisted and worked really hard and came up with so many ideas that if somebody else came up with 1,000 ideas, they would have tripped over their own masterwork too. Randy, I think you doing a great job reading the chat. It shows you care about the viewers. Well, thank you, Larry Tate. I appreciate that. Is writing songs the same as writing a book? Kinda. It's a lot shorter form. A lot shorter form. And, but there are a lot of things where there are a lot of aspects where writing a song is akin to writing a screenplay or writing a book. Again, it's a much shorter form. You can have themes in books. You can have themes in songs. You can have dialogue in songs. A great song to look at as far as, telling a story is Jenny by Flight of the Conchords. They both pretend to be a boyfriend and girlfriend that have parted for a long time. And then there's a great twist at the end. But yeah, if you look at Jenny from Flight of the Conchords, it's just like a normal conversation between two characters. But it's a great song. It's a funny and hilarious song, and I recommend you check it out if you can. So, don't be afraid to share your work with writers, especially in Hollywood, because if you go up to a producer and you go, "Oh, you're not going to steal my idea, are you?" Immediately, right then, they go, "This guy's a noob. This guy does not know what he's talking about. He's not a professional." Because again, to get sued for making a movie exactly ripping off somebody would cost so much more than just coming up with a movie that has the same basic idea. Songwriting seems more like poetry writing. Again, that is true, but there are a lot of songs and poetry that are in a very micro sense the same as writing a movie or a story. So yeah. So there we go. So I have accomplished my goals. It's been 90 minutes. I've given you 7 times 7 ways to crush writer's block, plus some freebies. Thank you for everybody who came in the chat. Thank you to Larry Tate. Thank you to Yakvo. Thank you for Pretend Story Times. Thank you for Quattro. Thank you to the new B&H. Thank you for Exhumed Visions hitting us up. And that is everybody who's there. So my name's Randy Brown. Remember, I'm a magician. You can check my stuff out at Cameo Man 2021 and the Mayor of Magic. If you want to go to my website, you can check out some of my screenplays and scripts. You can go to iamrandybrown.wixsite.com/scripts. Or script. It might be script or scripts. And that's I am Randy Brown. That's I as in internet, A as in apple, M as in mother, randybrown.wixsite.com/script. And if you want to check out my writing is there. And then if you want to check out my magic and see me do magic for hot chicks at bars and at Hooters, you can go to iamrandybrown.wixsite.com/magic. And you can see my stuff there. And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments after I'm done. Thanks, buddy. Helpful info. Thank you. And remember, my name's Randy Brown. I do the card tricks, but you all bring the magic. All right, bye.